all know her as Angie, and that's how I will be referring to her. Angie was born June 17th, 1924 in Bedford, Indiana, and she died November 16th, 2015 in Anaheim, California. She's survived by her sons, David Kerr, Stephen Kerr, Phil Kerr, and 8 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild that is on the way. I want to begin with the 23rd Psalm. You know, Angie was the daughter of a Southern Baptist minister. And the 23rd Psalm is a psalm she would have learned early on in her life. And so I'm going to read the 23rd Psalm, and I'm going to ask if you'd all please stand. You may be seated. And the family chose that song to begin with because they knew that Angie would want a lively and upbeat song to begin the service with. Nothing sad or somber for her. I want to begin today in I think a very unusual way. I have known Angie for 21 years. Her homegoing is particularly difficult for me because I'm a minister. And years ago when I was in seminary, I had a teacher who said, when you get to your church, you find out who the prayer warriors are in your church, because they're the ones that keep you in ministry. And he said, and oftentimes they will be old and they will be women. And that was Angie. She was a prayer warrior, and just about every time she saw me, she would say that she was praying for me. And I know she was praying for this church. She was praying for her family, and she was praying for all of you as well. So all of us share a very big loss with the homegoing of Angie. But I didn't know until very recently the depth of her love and her commitment to Christ. I have here with me a little booklet that Steve found. It's handwritten by Angie, and it says on the front, Thoughts for Today. Inside of it are several poems. I don't know how many of you knew that she wrote poetry. Several poems that she had written. There's no date on it, so I don't know when she wrote it. I don't know if these poems are over a long period of time or short. But I have read them all. In fact, I was up at midnight last night reading these poems. And people, they are outstanding. It is amazing, the poems that she wrote. I want to begin by reading one of her poems. It's a poem that tells all of you not only her love for Christ, but also the goal for her life. She wrote this: "O God, as I travel through the road of life, with cares and worries and worldly strife, may I always remember thy wonderful love, that sent thy Son from heaven above, to dwell among men a little while, then die on the cross for man's selfish wiles, to rise the third day a victor over death. Oh, that I might know thy holy love, the width and the breadth. So when cares and troubles begin to arise, I will go to my Jesus for the answer so wise, coming into my heart like sweet repose, giving peace to my heart and rest to my soul." That is the character and the depth of the woman whom we remember today. She talks about a desire to please God in whatever paths God takes her on. And we now know that path. Angie was born in Bedford, Indiana in 1924. In 1944, she met and married Ralph Kerr. Their courtship, I think as many of you know, was less than 5 months. And so friends and family were saying this thing isn't going to last 6 months. And I think you know they proved them all wrong. Angie was the daughter, as I said, of a Baptist minister. She was firm in her faith. And when you read her poetry, you see how true that is. And after she and Ralph were married, they lived in Indianapolis until 1947. Ralph had a job at the VA hospital, and then in 1947, he was transferred to Dublin, Georgia. And it's in Georgia where all 4 of their kids were born. Then in 1958, Ralph accepted a promotion and a transfer to the VA hospital in Colorado. And now the whole family had to move from Georgia down to Colorado. In 1961, he was transferred to Hot Springs, South Dakota. And remember, this is government, and government in those days, the way you got promoted, the way you worked up the ladder was by moving around a lot. And so they went to South Dakota. While there, Angie worked for the Stanley Home Products Company as a demonstrator and group leader. She had as many, at one time she had as many as 15 dealers working for her. And then with 4 children, with church, work, and keeping the house, I think you can imagine her days were quite full. The rest of the story I have here from their 50th anniversary. Something that probably many of you are familiar with. This was handed out at their 50th anniversary. But I'm going to pick up the story in 1965. Because it says in 1965, Ralph accepted a transfer to the Long Beach VA hospital with a promotion to budget officer. What a shock this move was to all the family. Uprooting the kids was quite traumatic. They bought a house in Buena Park where they have lived to this day. Since expenses were greater in the big city compared to the country towns, Angie decided she should continue work. She started out as a bus driver. I never knew that. Started out as a bus driver. Later she obtained a job as a letter carrier with the post office in Anaheim. She worked until 1974 when her arthritis got so bad she was hardly able to walk. She retired on disability. After 37 years and having transferred to more than 5 VA hospitals throughout the country, Ralph decided it was time to retire. Since then, Ralph and Angie have taken up square dancing for physical exercise and fun. They have traveled a lot, kept up their arts, music, and crafts, and have kept busy. They love their church and the many good friends they have met there. Today they are blessed with 4 healthy children. This is from their 50th, and 6 healthy grandchildren. What more could you ask for? They are also very thankful for their health and their good friends everywhere that they have made over the years. And indeed, I think you know they made many friends over the years. In fact, once both Ralph and Angie took a trip, a motorhome, went across country just to visit friends of theirs that they had met over the years. Well, it took 3 months to catch up with all their friends across country. Angie, I think it was safe to say, or is safe to say, was a people person. Friends were very important to her. In fact, over the years, Angie was involved with crafts, square dancing, curves, red hatters, and tops. And I don't know how many of you know this, she was also an avid reader, something that I very much appreciate. She would read sometimes as many as 3 books in one day. And so you can imagine, in fact, I remember her saying it to me, how difficult that was for her in this last year when she was, because of her eyesight, unable to read. But the most important thing to her was church. Her son David said this, Mom was always very strict about us kids going to church. Mom was always watching over us. Our growing up was religion and fishing. That was religion, in that order though, religion and fishing. She was always doing something for the church, for children, and even for kids on the Indian reservation. And David adds, she was also making things, or also always making things, even our clothes. Many of the shirts they had, Angie made. Phil said this, every weekend, Mom and Dad celebrated life. They had people over and they would sing. But she always made sure we went to church. Church again. Most important thing to her. Steve said she loved company and people. She loved to be surrounded by people. She was a great mother, no doubt a great wife, and did everything under her control to help us succeed in life. Well, I think that is certainly true. Temptations in this world of strife and sin. Then I bow my head in prayer, asking Jesus for the way to clear, to guide my child into his fold, a beautiful, clean life to mold. Then my hand is clasped with Jesus, or when my hand is clasped with Jesus, and at rest at last, may he always remember his mother, who stood the test and did her best to give him her Savior, her Lord, her quest. Wow. Men and women, I think you would agree with me that Angie was indeed a faithful wife, faithful mother. Many of you know what a faithful friend she was, and a faithful follower of Jesus Christ. She was what I think the Proverbs 31 woman was referring to. And so I want to read to you Proverbs 31, and I think as I do, you will see Angie in this text. Because in Proverbs 31, it says this: "An excellent wife who can find? For her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax, and works with her hands in delight. She is like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night, and gives food to her household, and portions to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it, and from her earnings she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. She stretches out her hands to the distant, and her hands grasp the spindle. She extends her hands to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She makes coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, and when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies belts to the tradesmen. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband also, and he praises her, saying, Many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates." That's Angie. You have heard what I have to say. I have a microphone here. Unfortunately, it's not a handheld, but I have a lapel mic. Handheld doesn't work for some reason. But I'm going to come down there, and I know many of you are saying, well, he didn't say this or he didn't say that. This is your opportunity to just stand, and I will hand you this. I might even kind of hold it for you. And you can say what you want to say about your memory of Angie. I think this is working. See, this is working. Anybody? As I come out, I know it's always scary to be the first. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, where? Here. Oh, okay.
I met Angie 34 years ago. She's like a mother to me. And we had so much fun in travels and vacations and square dancing and tops. I didn't get her a red hat or so, but she's just a beautiful lady, and I loved her. Wish I'd spent more time this past few months with her than I could.
I've only known Angie a brief while, but one thing I'm sure you all know, she was the best hugger. And I remember that most about her, you know, her kindness. And encouraging words, but she was the best hugger.
And ma'am, that was because she's a Baptist.
So am I. So am I.
Okay, there we go. Others?
Back corner.
Corner, oh. I'm getting there.
Well, I didn't have the privilege of knowing Angie maybe 10, 12 years is all. But as a retired art teacher, she always gave me some of her new crafts. And I'm wearing one of her necklaces right now, if you've never seen her, one of her most current interests. And she kept up to date with everything. And I loved everything.
In fact, our family's nativity scene is a craft that she made.
Ours
And we
here
still
at
have
church.
it here at church. Anybody else?
I miss Angie so much. She was my mother. I knew her for 50 years. She tied my first fishing hook on line. Loves you beef.
Thank you. Jim.
When I think of Angie, I think of her jam. I always had one of her kind of jam in my cupboard, and now I'll have to go out and buy it.
My name's Carol Perkins. Mainly I knew Angie from church. She come through the back door, had a kiss for everybody. But I always got one. Thank you.
I met Angie when I first came to this church, and she made me feel so welcome. The very first time I met her, she gave me a hug and said, "How you doing, darling?" And you know what? Every Sunday after, she always came up and gave me a hug, and it'll be a memory I'll hold for the rest of my life.
Thank you. Martin.
I remember meeting Angie when I was 4 years old, I think. And back to the how to go to the gym. I always be thankful for her life because she supported my family and I by making jam and helping us when we were going through difficult times, when we had financial struggles, and she was there making jam and selling it so she could help us, and I'll always be super thankful for that.
Wow, thank you, Martha. Others? Thank you.
I love Miss Angie. She was a Red Hatter and a proud Red Hatter. And I used to love to be at the table when she'd walk into the meeting because her smile would light up the room. And at the end, I had the chance to go up her places because she wasn't driving. And I just loved her in my car and chatting. And when I lost my mother this spring, she was so instrumental in giving me strength. And seeing, the Lord is taking her. And I just can never thank her for that beautiful smile and to her great jellies jams.
Thank you. Others? There we go.
I just wanted to say that we loved her in Red Hatters, and we couldn't start a meeting until she went around and hugged everybody.
That's right. Yeah, that was her.
And she was just like a little sunflower. She just had a very happy face. She was always pleasant, and she was always ready to do something that was You know, if you had something to do, she was right there participating, and I just love that about her. And we were very proud of her in our TOPS group because she was a wonderful COPS, and she was a wonderful person to look up to.
Thank you.